Well, this morning, I began my day in Jerusalem, the eternal and undivided capital of Israel. And now I stand before you in this synagogue in Amsterdam, the beating heart of this country, Holland. Now, the Dutch people and the Jewish people, well, we're both small in size, but great in spirit. And this glorious synagogue bears witness to the triumph of that spirit. It bears witness to the triumph of the spirit of the Jews of Spain and Portugal. Mr. Abravanel, you may not know this, but my father, you may know this. My father wrote a book about Don Isaac Abravanel, the great leader of Spanish Jewry, and he's devoted his life to the scholarship of the history of the Inquisition and the history of the Jews of Spain, and that wondrous society was broken down in one day. And these Jews, who included the greatest geniuses of that time, anywhere on earth, they were expelled. And in the lands that they lived in for 1,000 years, first in Spain, or for many centuries, and in Portugal a few years later, their lives were destroyed. It was the single greatest catastrophe of the Jewish people since the destruction of the temple. And it heralded another great catastrophe in the making. But at the time, it was an enormous breakdown of life. And these Jews, or some of them, came here and they found refuge in this country, and they rebuilt their shattered lives here. And this synagogue, this magnificent synagogue, bears testament to their powers of regeneration. But it also bears witness to the spirit of the Dutch people. They opened their arms to those fleeing religious fanaticism. They let those who escaped their inquisitors begin life anew with religious freedom, with freedom. And as the Jewish community began to be rooted in this land, the Netherlands enjoyed a golden age. It was an age that gave the world Rembrandt, Spinoza, Leeuwenhoek, many others. It was an age of great masters and great thinkers, free thinkers. An age of merchants and mariners, artists and scientists. This tiny nation, Holland, became the envy of the world. Its fame spread far and wide. The fame of a people rooted in biblical values, with a work ethic second to none. The fame of a people who championed liberty and who kept their unique identity while being tolerant of others. And as the Netherlands grew and prospered, so too did the Jewish community. And on the eve of World War II, it numbered 140,000 strong. Hebrew words, Jewish words, made their way into everyday Dutch. You know those words. Mazel. Everyone knows what mazel is. And Holland had a lot of it. And the Jews of Holland had a lot of it, but they were about to run out of luck because a new darkness spread over Europe. And Dutch Jewry was decimated. Now that's the wrong word. See, decimation is what the Romans used to do to spread a message of cruelty. They'd kill one man in 10 to decimate a community. But with Dutch Jewry, it's not that 1 in 10 were killed. It's that barely more than 1 in 10 survived. Over 80% of Dutch Jewry perished. And this is one of the highest percentages of any Jewish community in Europe. There were many non-Jewish citizens who stood on the sidelines. There were some who helped the Nazis, but there was also something else. There were many brave Dutch souls who stood up to the Nazi evil. And the record of this Dutch courage, that record stands out as well. The people of Holland can be proud that despite their size, the small size of their population, they have the second highest number of what we in Israel call the righteous Gentiles of any country. There were thousands of righteous Dutch men and women who risked their lives and the lives of their families to save Jews. This is the highest form of courage. You can risk your life. That requires great courage and heroism. But to risk the life of your children and your parents and your relatives to save somebody else, that may be the highest testament of bravery there is. Ladies and gentlemen, the Dutch and Jewish people have stood together in the past, and we stand together today. Israel is inspired by the history of Holland. I've studied it somewhat, and I find some remarkable similarities. This is the history of a small, free people that stood its ground against a great empire and won independence. The history of an entrepreneurial nation whose commercial success was admired throughout the world. And Israel sees itself in much the same way. We've stood our ground against much larger enemies committed to our destruction. We have a remarkable record of innovation and achievement, of high-tech startups and Nobel Prize-winning scientists that per capita is the highest in the world. But we also share, Israel and Holland, some present achievements. Both our countries are weathering a great economic storm. And I can say that so far, by the way, this places a burden on me and my government and on the government of Holland. So far, we've acted responsibly, even when others don't. And I think we have the economic performance to show for it. But I think that on the issues that most concern Israel, on the one issue that most concerns Israel, we also stand together. We stand together in opposing Iran's nuclear ambitions. Iran continues its feverish pursuit of nuclear weapons, all the time declaring its intention to wipe Israel off the map. And a nuclear-armed Iran is a threat to Israel, to the region, to the world. Iran must not be allowed to develop nuclear weapons, period. Israel and the Netherlands also stand together on the need to advance a secure and genuine peace with the Palestinians. Now, what's my formula for peace? It can be summed up in a few words. A demilitarized Palestinian state that recognizes the Jewish state. The Palestinian state, you can clap, it's fine, you can applaud. This is, there's free speech here, free clapping. There's even heckling, if you want it. Here's why we need a demilitarized state. Because we don't want to repeat the mistakes that were made in Lebanon and Gaza. In both places, Israel left the territory, and as soon as we left the territory, Iran walked in. It walked in with its proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon, its proxy Hamas in Gaza, and then they proceeded to stockpile rockets and missiles and fired roughly 12,000 rockets into Israel, into our cities, into our towns, on our children. Israel is a small country. Holland is a small country. Israel is smaller than Holland. Imagine 12,000 rockets being pelleted on you, and then have in your immediate neighborhood right now a total of about 70,000 rockets, 10,000 in Gaza, 60,000 in Lebanon, pointed on our heads. We have to make sure that doesn't happen a third time. And remember that the Samarian and Judean mountains dominate the country. They're much bigger than Gaza, much, much bigger. And Israel is left with a narrow coastline. And if we have tens of thousands of more rockets, that means that any point in Israel could be reached by rockets that have to traverse 1 minute, 2 minutes flight time. It's a tiny country. Israel is a great country, but it's a small country. And it faces the greatest security threats of any nation on earth. So in any peace treaty, for any peace to endure, to succeed, Israel needs real security agreements on the ground, not paper promises, real security on the ground. That's a prerequisite for peace, and that means a demilitarized Palestinian state. Now, peace will require compromises from both sides, but there's something that I, as the Prime Minister of Israel, will never compromise on. I will never compromise on Israel's security. That's my responsibility, to protect and ensure the Jewish future, the security of the one and only Jewish state. Thank you very much. Toda rabah. Thank you.